Welcome to another episode of Healthy Kidneys After 60. I am your host, Jane Pauley, and today we are venturing into a territory that might feel a bit uncomfortable for many of us. We often talk about what to add to our diets as we age, but rarely do we discuss the silent saboteurs hiding in plain sight right inside our fruit bowls. Joining me today is a man who has spent over 5 decades peering into the complexities of the human brain, a renowned neurosurgeon and medical journalist who has guided thousands through the fog of aging, Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
It is a profound pleasure to be here with you, Jane. Throughout my career, I have seen so many patients who do everything right. They exercise, they stay social, and they eat what they believe is a perfect diet, yet they still find their memories slipping away like sand through their fingers. Today, I want to share some hard truths I have gathered from the bedside and the laboratory, because protecting your legacy and your mind starts with what you put on your plate this very afternoon.
Dr. Gupta, it is a pleasure to have you. I want to start with something that I think will resonate with almost everyone listening today. Many of our listeners are in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, and they take immense pride in their health. They have swapped the red meat for poultry, they walk every morning, and most importantly, they eat plenty of fruit because we have been told our entire lives that fruit is nature's candy, pure, healthy, and vital. Yet so many of these same people come to me and say, Jane, I am doing everything the doctors told me to do, but I still find myself walking into a room and forgetting why I am there, or struggling to find a word that was on the tip of my tongue just seconds ago. It creates this underlying sense of panic, a fear that their mind is betraying them despite their best efforts. Could it be that the very foods we have put on a pedestal for decades are actually contributing to this mental decline as we cross that 60-year-old threshold?
Jane, you have touched on the great irony of modern aging. We are living longer, but we are not necessarily living sharper. And the reason often lies in a fundamental misunderstanding of how our bodies change as we enter our golden years. When you are 30 or 40, your body is a high-performance engine. It can process sugars and handle metabolic stress with a certain resilience. But once we pass 60, the biology of the brain undergoes a dramatic shift. Research shows that cerebral blood flow, the very lifeblood that delivers oxygen and nutrients to our neurons, drops by about 15% on average. This means the buffer zone we once had is gone. I often tell my patients that the brain becomes more sensitive, more fragile. What used to be a harmless snack in your 40s can become a metabolic toxin in your 70s. We see this in the way the brain handles glucose. When we flood our system with certain types of healthy foods, we aren't just nourishing our bodies, we might be inadvertently rusting our brain cells through a process we call oxidative stress and glycation. It is a heartbreaking reality because these individuals aren't being careless. They are being misled by outdated nutritional labels that don't account for the aging brain's unique vulnerabilities.
That is a staggering thought, the idea that our brain's filter, or its ability to handle these foods, essentially weakens by such a significant margin. It's almost as if the rules of the game change entirely without anyone handing us a new rule book. I imagine for someone listening, hearing that their blood flow has decreased and their brain is more fragile is quite frightening. It suggests that our internal environment is becoming much more volatile. When you mention that food can act as a toxin for the aging brain, are we talking about a slow, invisible erosion of our cognitive faculties? Is it possible that the fruit salad or the glass of juice we have every morning is creating a sort of internal weather that our older brains simply aren't equipped to weather anymore, leading to that dreaded brain fog or those moments of lost memory?
That is exactly the right way to visualize it, Jane. It is not an overnight collapse. It is a slow, silent erosion of the neural architecture. Think of your brain as a delicate garden. In your youth, the soil is rich and the drainage is perfect. You can pour a bit too much water, or in this case, sugar, and it recovers. But after 60, the drainage slows down. The sugar from certain fruits and processed fruit products begins to linger in the bloodstream longer than it should. This leads to a phenomenon where the brain's insulin receptors, which are crucial for memory formation in the hippocampus, start to become deaf to the signals they need to function. I have sat with so many brilliant men and women, professors, engineers, devoted grandparents, who are terrified because they feel a haze settling over their thoughts. They describe it as trying to think through a thick, wet blanket. They don't realize that by consuming high fructose or high glycemic fruits without the necessary fiber or in the wrong forms, they are triggering spikes in blood sugar that the aging brain perceives as an emergency. These spikes cause tiny inflammations in the blood vessels of the brain. Over time, these micro-injuries accumulate. The result isn't just a bad day or old age, it is the physical shrinking of the areas of the brain responsible for who we are and what we remember. We have to stop looking at fruit as a universal good and start looking at it as a potent biological tool that must be used with extreme precision after the age of 60.
Dr. Gupta, it is heart-wrenching to hear about the hidden biological toll that many proactive seniors are unknowingly taking on their brains. I often hear from people who have completely cut out processed snacks, pastries, and even white bread, replacing them with what they believe is the ultimate health food, fruit. They stock their pantries with all sorts of colorful options, thinking they are building a fortress around their memories. But then the confusion sets in. They are eating nature's bounty, yet they feel as though their focus is slipping, their conversations are becoming fragmented, and that vibrant mental clarity they once possessed is fading into a dull gray. It makes me wonder about the specific stories you've encountered in your clinic, those moments where a patient looks you in the eye, utterly confused, because they've followed every rule of healthy eating only to find their cognitive health heading in the wrong direction.
That confusion is something I witness almost every week, Jane, and it is a specific kind of pain because these people are trying so hard. I remember a patient of mine, Mary Collins, a 72-year-old retired teacher living in Florida. Mary was the pillar of her community, a woman who prided herself on her sharp wit and her ability to remember every student's name. When she came to see me, she was terrified. She told me, "My doctor, I'm doing everything right. I don't eat junk. I eat fruit with every meal." But as we dug deeper into her daily habits, I found the culprit hidden in her kitchen cabinet. Mary was consuming large quantities of canned fruits, peaches and pears, soaked in what the label called light syrup. She thought because it was fruit, it was safe. But for someone like Mary, that syrup was a cognitive poison. In her 70s, her liver couldn't process that concentrated fructose quickly enough, causing her blood sugar to spike and crash like a roller coaster. This constant fluctuation was starving her brain of a steady energy supply. She described a sensation of her thoughts being cut off mid-sentence, a literal break in the electrical signaling of her brain. It wasn't that she was losing her mind to a disease, she was drowning her neurons in a sea of hidden sugars that her aging metabolism simply couldn't navigate anymore.
It is deeply unsettling to realize that a simple can of peaches could be the difference between a sharp mind and a fragmented memory for someone like Mary. It seems we've been conditioned to believe that fruit is a magic word that cancels out any negative effects of the sugars it contains. But when you describe that roller coaster effect on the brain, it sounds like we are creating a state of internal chaos. For our listeners who are sitting at home right now, perhaps finishing a bowl of fruit or looking at their own pantry, how do they begin to reconcile the advice they've heard for 40 years with this new, harsher reality of how their older bodies actually process these sugars? Is it a matter of the form the fruit takes, or is it that we've fundamentally misunderstood the concept of healthy when it comes to the senior brain?
We have fundamentally misunderstood the dosage and the delivery system, Jane. The tragedy of Mary Collins was that she believed she was being virtuous. She didn't realize that when fruit is peeled, cooked, and submerged in syrup, it loses the very thing that makes it safe, the structural fiber. Fiber is the brake that slows down the absorption of sugar. Without it, the fructose hits the liver with the force of a tidal wave. In an older person, this triggers an inflammatory response in the brain's hypothalamus. Mary would tell me about brain fog that would descend every afternoon, making her feel like she was walking through a dream. I had to explain to her that her brain was literally struggling to find a stable fuel source. We see this so often, people swapping a candy bar for a bowl of syrup-soaked fruit and wondering why their memory isn't improving. The brain after 60 requires stability. It needs the slow, steady release of energy, not the violent spikes and crashes of natural sugars that have been stripped of their fiber. Mary's story ended well because we changed her environment, but it started with the painful realization that her healthy habits were actually the source of her cognitive decline. It's a wake-up call for everyone who thinks that just because it came from a tree, it's automatically a friend to the aging mind.
Dr. Gupta, your story about Mary really highlights how the form of our food changes everything as we age. But there is another staple of the healthy breakfast table that I think we need to address, and that is fruit juice. For so many of us, a morning without a large glass of orange juice or apple juice feels incomplete. We see the labels touting 100% pure and packed with vitamin C, and we feel like we are giving our bodies a concentrated burst of life. But if the whole fruit can be problematic when processed, I can only imagine what happens when we strip away the pulp entirely and drink just the liquid. Is it possible that this daily ritual which we perform with such good intentions is actually contributing to a physical change in our brains? A literal shrinking of the parts of ourselves that hold our most precious memories?
It is one of the most difficult truths I have to deliver to my patients, Jane, because the morning juice is such a cherished habit. But the science is uncompromising. When we drink fruit juice, even the purest kind, we are essentially drinking a concentrated sugar solution. Without the fiber of the whole fruit, that liquid hits our system instantly. Recent neuroimaging studies of seniors have shown a terrifying correlation. Those who consume fruit juice daily often show a faster rate of atrophy or shrinking in the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the brain's librarian. It's where we form and store new memories. When you flood your body with that much sugar at once, it triggers a process called glycation. This is where sugar molecules bond to proteins in your brain, making them stiff and dysfunctional. I tell my patients to imagine their brain cells becoming sticky and unable to communicate. You might get your vitamin C, yes, but you are paying for it with the physical integrity of your brain. It's a lopsided trade that no one over 60 should be making.
The idea of our brain shrinking or our neurons becoming sticky is a haunting image, especially when the cause is something as seemingly innocent as a glass of orange juice. It feels like a betrayal of our own efforts. We think we are nourishing ourselves, but we are actually accelerating the aging process from the inside out. For someone who has spent 30 or 40 years starting their day this way, the thought that they might have been inadvertently damaging their internal librarian is hard to swallow. Is this damage irreversible? Or is the brain resilient enough to stop this atrophy if we simply put down the juice glass today? How do we begin to undo the years of sticky proteins that might be clouding our thoughts right now?
The brain is remarkably plastic, Jane, but we have to give it a chance to breathe. The problem is that many people don't realize they are in a state of chronic neuroinflammation caused by these liquid sugars. When you drink that juice, your insulin levels skyrocket, and in the aging brain, high insulin is actually neurotoxic. It prevents the brain from clearing out the metabolic waste that leads to plaques. I've seen patients who were convinced they had the early stages of dementia, but when they stopped the juice and moved back to whole fiber-rich foods, the fog lifted. They weren't cured of a disease, they were simply no longer poisoning their neurons every morning. However, if the habit continues for decades, the shrinking becomes permanent. We see the brain scans where the folds of the brain are wider and the tissue is thinner. It is a slow, quiet theft of the self. We have to understand that as we age, our tolerance for liquid hits of sugar vanishes. We need to eat our fruit, not drink it, if we want to keep the librarian in our brain healthy and active for the decades to come.
It's a powerful distinction, Dr. Gupta, eating the fruit versus drinking it. But even for those who avoid the juice, there seems to be a hidden danger in the consistency of our habits. Many people find a routine they like and stick to it for years, believing that if a little is good, then a lot every single day must be better. I'm thinking of those who have a very specific health routine that they never deviate from, yet they still experience that midday slump or a sudden inability to focus on a book or a crossword puzzle. They aren't sick in the traditional sense. Their blood work might even look okay to a general practitioner, but they know something is wrong. They feel a disconnect. How do we explain those cases where the person seems healthy on paper, but their brain is clearly struggling to keep up with their daily healthy habits?
This is exactly what I saw with Robert Miller, a 68-year-old gentleman from Ohio. Robert was a marathon runner in his younger years and remained very active. For 30 years, he started every single morning with a large glass of natural fruit juice and a massive bowl of tropical fruit. He didn't have diabetes, his fasting glucose was within the normal range, so his primary doctor told him he was doing great. But Robert came to me because he felt a brain fog every afternoon that was so thick he couldn't drive. He felt like his brain was running out of batteries by 2 p.m. What Robert didn't realize was that he was suffering from what we now call type 3 diabetes, or insulin resistance of the brain. Even though his body could still manage the sugar, his brain had become desensitized. He was flooding his system with so much fructose every morning that his brain's energy receptors essentially shut down to protect themselves. He wasn't ill by standard metrics, but his brain was starving in a land of plenty because it could no longer process the fuel he was giving it.
That term, type 3 diabetes, is terrifying because it suggests that our brain can be diabetic even if our body doesn't show the typical signs. Robert's story is a perfect example of how the traditional markers of health can fail us as we age. He was a marathon runner, he was active, and yet his brain was shutting down because of his breakfast. It makes me wonder how many people are walking around right now feeling that same afternoon slump or that flickering of their mental energy and just chalking it up to getting older. They don't realize that their brain is actually in a state of emergency, trying to protect itself from the very food they are eating. How do we break that cycle of starving in a land of plenty?
It requires a radical shift in how we view fuel, Jane. For Robert, the fix was counterintuitive. We had to take away his healthy morning juice and his high-sugar tropical fruits like mangoes and pineapples. We replaced them with fats and fibers. He was shocked. He thought he needed that sugar for energy. But once we removed the constant sugar spikes, his brain's insulin sensitivity began to recover. The afternoon fog vanished within 3 weeks. He told me it was like someone had finally wiped the grease off his glasses. Robert's case proves that normal blood sugar on a test doesn't mean your brain is healthy. The aging brain is much more sensitive to the insults of sugar than the rest of the body. We have to be vigilant. We have to listen to those subtle signs, the fatigue, the loss of concentration, the flicker of memory, because those are the early warning sirens that our diet is literally suffocating our neural pathways.
It is incredible to hear that someone like Robert could see such a dramatic change in just 3 weeks. But there is another category of healthy snacks that I see people my age reaching for constantly. Dried fruits. We see them in the natural aisle, dried mango, dates, raisins, or those fruit leathers that look so innocent. They are convenient, they don't spoil, and they satisfy that craving for something sweet without being a candy bar. But I suspect, based on everything you've said, that these might be even more dangerous than the fresh versions. When you take a fruit and remove all the water, aren't you just concentrating the sugar into a tiny, brain-damaging pill? It seems like the perfect trap for a senior who wants a quick snack but doesn't want to eat junk food.
You've hit the nail on the head, Jane. Dried fruit is effectively nature's candy in the worst possible way for a senior brain. I often think of Linda Parker, a 75-year-old woman from California who was a patient of mine. Linda was a very health-conscious woman who loved to hike and stay active in her church. She had stopped eating cookies and candies years ago, but she had a habit of snacking on dried mango and dates throughout the day. She thought she was being smart. But when we analyzed her diet, we found that a single handful of those dried mangoes had as much sugar as 2 or 3 glazed donuts. Because the water is gone, you can eat 5 times as much without feeling full. For Linda, this resulted in a constant low-grade elevation of her blood sugar that never settled. She started noticing that she couldn't focus on her books anymore, and she was becoming increasingly irritable and anxious, classic signs of sugar brain. Her brain was constantly inflamed because of those natural snacks.
It's shocking to think that a handful of dried mango could be equivalent to several donuts in terms of its impact on the brain. Linda probably felt so proud of herself for choosing the fruit over the cookie, yet she was unknowingly putting her brain in a state of constant inflammation. That irritability and loss of focus she felt. How many families are struggling with a loved one who seems to be changing or getting cranky with age, not realizing it's actually the dried apricots or dates in the pantry that are driving those personality shifts. It's not just about memory, it's about our temperament and our ability to engage with the people we love.
That is a very profound point, Jane. We often focus on the memory aspect, but the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that regulates our emotions and our social behavior, is also highly sensitive to sugar-induced inflammation. Linda's family actually thought she was developing early onset personality changes related to dementia. They were grieving for the woman she used to be. When I looked at her blood work, her A1C was creeping up, not into the danger zone for a GP, but definitely into the danger zone for a neurologist. I told her, Linda, your brain is on fire. We cut out the dried fruits entirely and replaced them with raw walnuts and a few fresh berries. Within a month, her daughter called me in tears saying her mother was back. The irritability was gone and she was sharp again. It's a powerful lesson. These concentrated fruits are a trap. For a 75-year-old brain, they are simply too much for the system to handle. We have to treat dried fruit as a rare treat, not a daily snack, if we want to preserve both our minds and our spirits.
Your brain is on fire. That is an image that will stay with me, Dr. Gupta. It suggests that the damage is happening right now in real time, even when we think we are just having a snack. But for many of our listeners, the signs are much more subtle than a personality shift. They might just feel a bit more tired than usual, or they find themselves forgetting a name and telling themselves, well, I'm 80, what do I expect? We have this tendency to normalize our decline. We excuse the lapses in memory as an inevitable part of the aging process. But you've seen thousands of patients, and I imagine you can distinguish between normal aging and the sugar-induced decline we've been discussing. What are the specific red flags that people should be looking for in their own lives?
The most dangerous thing we can do is normalize the loss of our mental edge, Jane. I remember James Thompson, an 81-year-old from Texas. James was a retired judge, a man whose mind was his greatest asset. He started noticing that he would lose the thread of a conversation during Sunday dinner with his grandkids. He'd be telling a story and suddenly the next piece of the story was just gone. He also noticed a profound mental fatigue after lunch. He told me, "Doctor, I'm not sleepy, I'm just weary in my head." This is a key red flag. If your brain feels tired after eating what you think is a healthy meal, perhaps a big bowl of fruit or a smoothie, that is not age. That is a metabolic signal that your brain is struggling to process a sugar spike. James thought he was just slowing down, but he was actually experiencing the early stages of cognitive brownouts.
A cognitive brownout. That's a terrifyingly accurate way to describe it. It's not a total blackout, but the lights are dimming and you're losing the power to stay present. When James felt that weariness in his head, it was his brain's way of crying for help. I think many people can relate to that feeling of losing the thread of a story. It's embarrassing, it's frustrating, and it makes you want to withdraw from social situations. If James hadn't come to see you, if he had just kept accepting it as part of being 81, where would he have ended up? Is this the tipping point where forgetfulness turns into something much more permanent and devastating?
Absolutely. If left unchecked, those brownouts eventually lead to permanent blackouts as the neurons actually begin to die from the chronic inflammation. For James, the culprit was his daily health routine of bananas and grapes, two fruits that are very high in sugar and low in the specific antioxidants the aging brain needs. We worked together to transition him to a brain protective diet. We introduced blueberries, apples with the skin on, and avocados. He had to learn to eat fruit with a source of protein or fat to slow down the sugar. Within months, James told me he felt like he had reclaimed his seat on the bench. He was able to follow the complex stories his grandkids told and even started writing his memoirs. His story shows us that these early signs are not a death sentence. They are an opportunity. If you feel that mental weariness, if you are losing your place in conversations, don't blame your age. Look at your plate. Your brain might just be waiting for you to change the fuel you're giving it.
It is so inspiring to hear about James reclaiming his mind at 81. It gives us all so much hope. But I want to go back to the supermarket for a moment, Dr. Gupta. We've talked about juice and dried fruit, but there is a whole new category of healthy snacks that are flooding the shelves. Banana chips, apple chips, and dehydrated fruit medleys. They look so rustic and natural, often packaged in earthy colored bags that suggest they are straight from the farm. But as we look closer, we realize these aren't just dried fruit. They are often fried or coated in natural sweeteners. It feels like the food industry has found a way to take something that was already problematic for seniors and make it even more dangerous by disguising it as a gourmet health food.
It is a marketing minefield, Jane, and the aging brain is the primary victim. These fruit chips are often the worst of all worlds. They take a high-sugar fruit, remove the water to concentrate that sugar, and then often fry them in seed oils that are highly inflammatory. When you consume these, you aren't just getting a sugar spike, you are also getting a dose of oxidized fats that can cross the blood-brain barrier. There is research emerging now that suggests these specific types of processed natural snacks are linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's because they contribute to leaky brain, a condition where the protective barrier of the brain becomes porous. We see the packaging and think healthy, but our brains see a chemical assault. We have to be incredibly skeptical of anything that comes in a bag, no matter how many pictures of orchards are on the front.
神楼的大脑，这个概念应该让每个人都停下脚步。我们最重要器官的保护屏障，可能因为在健康食品店买的零食而变得有漏洞。这个想法非常令人担忧，感觉我们被欺骗了。我们正试图做正确的事，避开垃圾食品活架，结果却发现健康的替代品同样有害，甚至更有害。老年人如何应对这种情况？如果包装在欺骗我们，我们应该寻找什么？这是需要阅读每一项细则的问题，还是我们应该只坚持哪些不需要标签的东西？
The safest rule, especially after 60, is that the more a food has been handled by a factory, the less your brain wants it. If a fruit has been sliced, dried, fried, or sweetened, it has lost its intelligence. Real fruit is a complex package of vitamins, minerals, and fiber. When it becomes a chip, it's just a delivery system for sugar and inflammation. I tell my patients to look for the integrity of the food. Can you recognize it in its original form? If not, your brain probably won't recognize it as healthy fuel. We have to remember that the food industry's goal is craveability, not cognition. They want you to eat the whole bag of banana chips, but your brain needs you to stop at one or two. By choosing these processed fruit snacks, we are unknowingly participating in an experiment on our own neural health. We must return to the basics: fresh, whole, organic fruits that still have their water and their fiber intact. That is the only way to ensure the leaky brain stays sealed and our memories stay protected.
The more it's been handled, the less your brain wants it. That is a perfect rule of thumb for all of us. But I want to shift the conversation towards something more positive now. We've spent a lot of time talking about what to avoid, but there is so much power in what we can eat. You've mentioned berries and apples several times, and I want to dive into why these specific choices are so transformative. I've heard you speak about anthocyanins and anti-inflammatory properties. But for the person sitting in their kitchen right now, it might seem too simple. Can a small change, like swapping a banana for a cup of blueberries, really be the catalyst that saves a person's memory? Can something so small truly have such a profound impact on the complex machinery of the human brain?
It sounds like a health cliche, Jane, but the science behind it is nothing short of miraculous. Let me give you an example of a patient who made this exact shift. We moved them away from the high-sugar tropical fruits and introduced a daily ritual of 1 cup of wild blueberries. Blueberries are packed with anthocyanins. These are the pigments that give them their color, but in the brain, they act like a cleanup crew. They actually cross the blood-brain barrier and help clear out the toxic proteins that cause memory loss. Within just a few weeks, this patient, who had been struggling with word-finding difficulties, started to notice a clarity they hadn't felt in years. They weren't just remembering better, they were thinking faster. It's not just about one fruit, it's about changing the biological environment of your brain from one of inflammation to one of repair.
It's fascinating to think of these little berries as a cleanup crew for our minds. It makes the act of eating them feel like a deliberate, heroic act of self-care. But I think some people might be skeptical. They might think, I've been eating poorly for years. Surely a cup of berries can't undo all that. Is it really just that simple? And why these specific fruits? What is it about a blueberry or a kiwi that makes it so much more powerful than, say, a grape or a mango for someone over 60? It feels like we are finally getting the secret code to brain health. And I want to make sure we understand exactly why these super fruits are the ones we should be reaching for.
The secret code, Jane, is the balance of sugar to protective compounds. A mango is a sugar bomb with a little bit of vitamin. A blueberry is a concentrated dose of brain medicine with very little sugar. When you eat a blueberry, you are giving your brain the tools it needs to fight oxidative stress, the rusting we talked about earlier. We also love apples with the skin because the skin contains quercetin, which protects neurons from damage. And kiwi is a powerhouse of vitamin C and fiber, which helps maintain a healthy gut-brain axis. For my patients, these aren't just snacks, they are prescriptions. When you make these swaps, you are literally changing the chemistry of your cerebrospinal fluid. You are lowering the temperature of the inflammation in your brain. It is never too late to start. Even at 70, 80, or 90, the brain is waiting for the right nutrients to begin its own repair process. That 1 cup of berries is a signal to your brain that the emergency is over and it can start functioning at its peak again.
A prescription for the brain, I love that. It shifts the power back to us. We aren't just victims of aging, we are the guardians of our own cognitive future. You've mentioned several fruits now, and I want to make sure our listeners have a definitive list. If we are standing in the produce aisle, looking at all the options, what are the 5 gold standard fruits for anyone over 60? And more importantly, how should we eat them? You mentioned earlier that we shouldn't just eat them alone. Is there a golden rule for how to combine these fruits with other foods to ensure that our blood sugar stays stable and our brain stays sharp? This feels like the roadmap we've all been looking for.
If I could write a brain health prescription for every senior, these would be the 5. Blueberries, pomegranates, apples, kiwi, and avocado. Yes, avocado is a fruit, and it is perhaps the most important one because it provides the healthy monounsaturated fats that act as a shield for your neurons. Pomegranates are incredible for improving blood flow to the brain. Remember that 15% drop we talked about? Pomegranates help fight that. But here is the golden rule for how to eat them. Never eat fruit on an empty stomach and never eat it alone. Always pair your fruit with a buffer, something like a handful of raw walnuts, a spoonful of Greek yogurt, or even a piece of cheese. The fat and protein in these buffers slow down the digestion of the fruit's sugar, ensuring that your brain gets a steady drip of energy rather than a violent flood.
That is such a practical, life-changing piece of advice. Never eat fruit alone. It's so simple. Yet I imagine it makes a world of difference in how our bodies process that sugar. It turns the fruit into a slow-burning fuel rather than a sudden explosion. I'm thinking of all the people who have a bowl of fruit for breakfast and nothing else. They are essentially setting themselves up for that brownout later in the day. By adding those walnuts or that yogurt, we are buffering our brain from the impact. It's about creating a balanced internal environment. As we look at these 5 fruits, it feels like we are finally taking control. This is the choice you mentioned earlier, the choice to feed our memory instead of our cravings.
Exactly, Jane. This is where the science meets the soul. When you choose to eat that apple with a few almonds, you are making a commitment to your future self. You are saying, as I know, I want to be present for my grandchildren's weddings. I want to remember the stories of my life. We have to stop thinking of healthy eating as a chore or a restriction. It is a form of empowerment. By following this gold standard and using the buffer rule, you are giving your brain the stability it needs to thrive. You'll find that the fog lifts, the energy stays consistent throughout the day, and that fear of losing your mind begins to fade. It is the most rewarding investment you can ever make, and it starts with the very next thing you choose to eat. Your brain is a masterpiece, and these 5 fruits are the maintenance kit it has been waiting for.
Dr. Gupta, this has been an eye-opening journey. We started with the fear of losing our memories, and we are ending with a sense of profound hope and empowerment. It's clear that our brains aren't just winding down because of a clock on the wall. They are responding to the environment we create for them every single day. As we wrap up this conversation, I'm struck by the idea that our memories are the wealth of our old age. They are the stories we tell, the wisdom we share, and the connection we have with the people who matter most. To think that we can protect that wealth through such simple daily choices is a beautiful message. What is the final thought you want to leave with our listeners, those who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed or even guilty about their past habits?
My final message is one of compassion, Jane. If you are listening to this and feeling guilty about the juice you drank this morning or the dried fruit in your pantry, please stop. You didn't know. You were doing your best with the information you had. But now you have a new set of tools. Your brain is not a static machine. It is a living, breathing organ that wants to heal. It wants to remember. I have seen 80-year-olds reclaim their mental sharpness just by making these small shifts. Think of your mind as the bridge to your family, your history, and your independence. Every time you choose a cup of berries over a sugary snack, you are strengthening that bridge. You are choosing to stay you for as long as possible. Your legacy is written in your neural pathways, and it is a legacy worth fighting for. Take it one meal at a time, one buffered fruit at a time, and watch as your world becomes clear again.
That is a beautiful way to put it, Dr. Gupta, that our legacy is written in our neural pathways. It reminds us that our health is the foundation of everything we love. I want to thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and most of all, your heart. You've given us more than just medical advice. You've given us a way to reclaim our lives. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us on Healthy Kidneys After 60. I hope you feel as inspired as I do to take a closer look at your fruit bowl today and make a choice that your future self will thank you for.
Thank you, Jane. It has truly been an honor to share these stories and these truths. I hope everyone listening remembers that you are the captain of your own ship, and it's never too late to steer toward a clearer, brighter horizon. Take care of your brain, and it will take care of you. Goodbye, everyone.
If you found today's episode helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this podcast with someone you love. We have so many more deep dives into the secrets of aging well coming your way. Until next time, stay sharp, stay healthy, and cherish every memory. Goodbye for now.